All right, hey everybody. My name's Kyle Falkenhagen. I run our cloud portfolio at CSC. I've been working in the cloud space for about 8 years now. I came from Service Mesh, where I ran product management for a product called the Agility Platform. Before that, I started a company called ExoCloud back when AWS just had a command line. So before they even put up a web portal, if you will, to be able to access their resources, they just had their command line tools. We were really working on a way for organizations to more easily access their services. So I've been in the space for a long time. I've spent that entire time working with large organizations. I haven't spent much time working with startups or anything like that other than ourselves, obviously. So I've got a lot of experience working with large organizations, understanding the challenges they face and moving to the cloud and how to resolve those challenges. And that's really kind of the key message that we have for today. We'll talk about what those challenges are. We'll talk about some of the ways to remediate those challenges. I am going to talk a little bit about CSC because that's part of what we do, but the challenges are global and the solutions can be implemented any number of ways, but I will show you the way that we do it today. I'm also going to be joined up here by Eric Weinbrenner, who heads up our security portfolio. He's going to tackle the last 20 minutes or so. We're going to do a deeper dive on the actual security aspects around protecting workloads. I'm going to try not to bore anybody with PowerPoint. We're going to do about 7 slides, and then we're actually going to jump into a demo and really show you how we do this for our clients, and then we'll have a few slides on the back end. So one of the key things I think everybody's seen, I'm sure everybody faces, I looked at the attendees for today, there's lots of big companies represented in here. There is a desire and a need, an urgent need, to move to the cloud to remain competitive in today's world. And when I say move to the cloud, I use that term fairly loosely in the sense that it could potentially mean a private cloud, it could mean a public cloud like AWS, but it also means all of the operating changes that need to go in place. We spend a lot of time, especially at conferences like this, talking about the technology side of it. How do we automate the provisioning of workloads and applications? We don't spend too much time talking about all of the people and process changes that have to happen as well, because at the end of the day, for larger organizations to adopt the cloud, some of the biggest challenges are really on the people and process side. And so that's one of the hardest things to change within an organization to really be successful in the cloud. So we'll get into a little bit more specifics around that. But some of the other big challenges are around, obviously, the technology related to automation and orchestration. There's security challenges. You no longer have access to the physical boxes and the connectivity. So it's not that public cloud is any less secure. I'd actually argue that it's more secure than most people's data centers. But you still have to have a new set of compensating controls to give everybody the warm fuzzies, right? That everything's okay, and to know when something's not okay. Connectivity is a big issue. So how do we securely connect or extend our data center into a public cloud environment like AWS? And so those are really kind of the key challenges that we're going to talk about today. And then the biggest one is really around governance, risk, and compliance. So as a large organization, a lot of you are in highly regulated industries. Some of you may actually be in the government. We do a lot of work with the government as well. So there's lots of different concerns that you have to not only prove to auditors that you've taken care of, but you need to be able to be audited when that happens or provide that proof. But then there's lots of things that are just specific to your business. So you want to ensure that you're not putting proprietary data, out into the public cloud environment without putting the right controls in place. So all of those different policy and governance risks need to have some sort of control mechanism ensuring that you're moving to the cloud in a safe way. We don't want to stifle the agility of AWS, for example, but we do need to make sure we put the guardrails in place to keep the organization safe. And that'll be a big theme for today. So specifically here, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some of the ways that we do policy, governance, and security, and how we ensure that workloads and data are going into the right environments based on not only their technical requirements, but also any business requirements associated with the application. We'll talk about how we can blueprint applications, and by this I mean define logical designs for the application so that they can be modeled once and then deployed into multiple environments. And by environments, I could simply mean multiple AWS availability zones or geographies. I could also mean very common, especially in large organizations, very comfortable using AWS for dev and test, but they still want to deploy their production workloads that are accessing their production data within their own data centers. So if you tackle that as two separate problems, what happens is you set yourself up for all sorts of issues because you're having people do things in two different ways. You don't have fidelity as that application workload is moving between environments. So with the power of blueprints, you can model out your application once and all of its dependencies, and then policies can dictate to which environment that gets provisioned. The third, we're going to spend some time talking about how we connect securely into an AWS environment. So obviously there's DirectConnect, but a lot of organizations need help not only setting that up, but configuring it. They have networking agreements with big providers like AT&T or Verizon or somebody else in the other geographies. So how do we do that securely? How do we facilitate that? And then finally, we're going to talk about endpoint protection. So we have quite a large portfolio in that space. That's what Eric's going to talk about at the end after the demo. Before we jump into that, I did kind of want to set the stage, and I think, you know, one of the things we do is, I mean, I'm a techie. I have an engineering background. As a developer, I always like to jump into the technology because that's where I'm most comfortable. But it's important to take a step back and realize, why is cloud so important? And I think it's because, you know, organizations are trying to be the best. And they're trying to improve their revenues, lower their costs, remain competitive, provide differentiated value to their customers. And IT is really just an enabler of that vision. I mean, all of the actual value-creating activities, for the most part, happen within the business units, the application teams that are creating those new systems of engagement or creating those new applications or offerings that are being brought to market. And IT is really there to facilitate and enable them to be able to do that as quickly as possible. And when you have things like DevOps, continuous delivery, the application teams moving faster than they've ever moved in the past, they have a new set of requirements for the IT departments, right? The old ways of delivering IT, where you put in a request on potentially a spreadsheet or through some basic HTML form, it goes off through 10 approvers, people in networking, data center, security, compliance, all have to sign off on it. Somebody's on vacation. Next thing you know, it's 6 months before you actually get that server turned around. It doesn't work anymore. So again, this goes back to the people and process. You can't just address the automation, because if you don't address the people and process, you're really not going to be able to give the application teams the experience they need to be competitive. So a lot of times what we see is, because of this, we have our application team sitting in our business units going out, signing up for AWS with their credit card, which isn't inherently bad in itself. They're doing what they need to do to get their jobs done. But at the same time, they're potentially exposing the organization to a great deal of risk. And so the idea, like I mentioned earlier, is we want to, I've always said, go fast but stay safe. We want to seamlessly expose all of the greatness of AWS, but we want to do it in a secured and governed way so that we're keeping the organization safe. And so that's really the entire theme of today. Obviously, for large organizations, this doesn't happen overnight. You can't just say, I'm going to go into AWS, I'm going to expose it to all my developers, and they can do whatever they want. You know, there are multiple phases. We get involved with clients at all of these different phases. A lot of people like to dip their toes into private cloud before they go into public cloud. So there's a number of different entry points. A lot of times, even public cloud comes before private cloud, and that's fine. So it doesn't necessarily mean these go in order. But these are some of the different stages that we see, with the end goal of being this concept of IT as a service. We want IT to be providing infrastructure, platforms, applications, everything that the application teams need to do their job in a true on-demand self-service fashion. So Amazon and CSC teamed up a couple of years ago really to help organizations along this journey. We want to enable them to move into AWS environments, and we're doing that in a number of very specific ways. One is in upfront consulting, so being able to come into an organization, understand their challenges, their needs, their desires for that future state, and be able to help them craft a story and a transformation on how they get to that point. Then obviously comes things like migrations or application modernizations. How can we take applications and make them suitable for a cloud environment, and then of course actually move those into an AWS environment. And then the next thing becomes, how do we actually run and maintain those things that we've deployed into AWS? Not every application is what I'd call cloud native in the sense that fault tolerancy and scalability is built into the app. There's still a lot of applications that can benefit greatly from AWS that still need to be monitored, still need to be backed up and patched, et cetera. And so being able to offer those managed services within an AWS environment and tie that into all of your existing service management and operational control plane is a key to that. All right, so just a couple more slides and then we'll actually get to the demo here. So one of the things that we have, so I talked about Service Mesh and the Agility platform. So CSC acquired that a couple of years ago, and it's a cloud management platform. So what it allows you to do is basically expose IT services or deliver on-demand consumption of IT services across a hybrid cloud environment, meaning you can provide a consistent experience for your application teams across both the public and private cloud. And you can have a single control plane that allows you to ensure that the organization is accounting for all of its compliance and security needs. And we'll talk more specifically about what that means here in a minute. So the three main areas of the product, the first is around Blueprint. So again, the value of being able to quickly and logically describe an application, its dependencies, the components that make it up, so that it can be quickly onboarded into AWS or any other cloud environment. Again, what we see time and time again within these large organizations is this desire to be able to have flexibility in where these applications get provisioned, whether it's a private cloud environment, whether it's AWS, whether it's a particular region within one of those cloud providers. Being able to model something once, deploy many times in different environments is absolutely key. The second is around the policy-driven governance. So this is really the bread and butter of the product and what sets it apart from others, in that you can define the different types of policies that are suitable to your industry, to your organization, to your business unit. And these policies can be enforced not only at the infrastructure level or dictating where things get deployed, but they can also be controlling how things get configured. They can be monitoring configuration for drift, and then they can automatically be remediating those situations. So there's all types of different policies. I mean, things like PCI compliance, HIPAA, data residency laws. If you saw the safe harbor laws yesterday, the UK overturned some of that. So now there's the question for American companies, do we have to have a much larger presence in the EU now because we can no longer ship PII data over to the States? So all of these concerns are very real concerns for larger organizations, and they're things that have to be answered before clients can really begin to adopt AWS. And then finally, again, this goes back to the business statement earlier. IT is in service of a goal. That goal is providing differentiated value to your clients. DevOps, continuous delivery, application release automation, those are the things that really drive and make a difference. And those are the things that we want to be able to enable. And it's important to keep that in mind. All right, so the second challenge I talked about, so we've talked a little bit about blueprinting, orchestration, policy, and governance. The third is really around connectivity. How can we provide managed and secure connectivity into AWS? And so we've recently partnered up with Brocade with their Viata router, as well as AT&T and Intel, to provide a solution to do this, combining the power of the Agility platform and the power of NetBond, which is basically a layer that sits on top of their MPLS VPNs and allows you to automatically set up secure connections into AWS. So that's a big challenge for a lot of organizations, and how are they going to extend their network out into these public cloud providers? How are they going to allow their users to access the workloads that are sitting in those environments? You can see some of the benefits here, a little diagram of how that's actually constructed. And then finally, we're about to hop into the demo. As an example, I wanted to take our big data platform as a service. So this is one of the offerings that we've been deploying in AWS for, what, four years now or so. So this offering is provided to our clients. It oftentimes contains very sensitive data of our clients. And more than 50% of the time, we actually deploy this into AWS, and we've been doing that for 4 years. So the same challenges that an enterprise organization faces in deploying their applications into the cloud, we have that same example internally. And so we've worked through a lot of these things. The same ways that we've figured out how to solve these problems for ourselves is what we can turn around and help our clients do as well. All right, let me. All right, so I've mentioned the primary consumer of these services are the application teams, so developers, QA engineers, project managers, the like. And what you want to be able to do is provide a self-service catalog. You've even seen AWS last year announcing their service catalog. I believe that just went GA a couple months ago. But this idea that you can provide a catalog of infrastructure, platform, application level offerings that your developers can come to, and based on who they are and what they're working on, they can consume those things on demand. So here you see an example of just some representative services, everything from our big data platform as a service we just talked about. It doesn't have to be traditional compute resources. It can be service-based resources as well. So you see like an AT&T NetBond connection, being able to provision that on demand. See everything from workloads, Red Hat, Windows workloads to actual application environments, if you will. So all of these, this isn't, I mean, it's a service catalog, right? So we're not going to spend a lot of time here, but being able to browse through what you have access to, be able to order it either on behalf of yourself or a project that you belong to. But what sets us apart is really this blueprinting. So I'm going to come over to the designer, and I'm actually going to show you behind the scenes. This one's, I think, better, but let me see. No. So I will point out, not without probably changing the resolution on my laptop. So let me just point out, some of these will be a little bit bigger. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, there you go. That's not bad. All right, so you may not be able to see the tree on the left, but you'll be able to see the main content. So we talked a little bit about being able to blueprint, right? Logically lay out an application or a service and its dependencies so that it can be provisioned into multiple environments. So here's an example. This is a kind of a traditional three-tier Java application environment. We have a load balancer, we have a web server, and then of course we have a database sitting on the back end. Some of the things that you want to be able to do, because you're not tying it to a particular cloud provider, you need to be able to set constraints, or what we call affinities, right? So we want to make sure, in this case, that all of these workloads are deployed into the same cloud. Not specifying what cloud, but specifying that they need to be deployed together. That's a very common thing. Location affinity, so this maps to availability zones in AWS, but it may map to something else in a different environment. But being able to set, maybe for DR reasons or performance reasons, we need to make sure that workloads are either co-located or not co-located to meet those requirements. And then of course tiers being your traditional network tiers. So ensuring that databases are going into a database tier, web servers are going into a web tier, etc. But one of the things I wanted to point out here is it's not just the base operating systems. That's what you kind of see here on the right. But you can actually model out all of the different configuration items that need to get installed once the workloads have been provisioned. And so this guarantees that these things are done in a repeatable way. And when things are done repeatably and automated, there's less room for error. And you can use our own packaging syntax. We support Chef and Puppet and other configuration management systems. So being able to leverage these in a graphical way to build up your application or service. Also support for services. So Amazon sets the benchmark in providing higher level value-added services to application teams, whether it's things like relational database service, DynamoDB, ELB. Being able to support those within the product and leverage those within your designs is important. One of the challenges with doing that, though, and it's not necessarily a bad challenge, it's more of a consideration, is you want to ensure that you purposely are tying your application to AWS. So if you choose to use ELB, if you choose to use some of their higher level services, you are tying yourself into the AWS framework, which for a lot of new applications is fine. But again, going back, if you're looking at taking some of your legacy applications and being able to consistently deploy those across private and public cloud environments through a life cycle, that's something that needs to be considered. So even our services support the idea of being abstracted in the sense that you can drag on that I need a load balancer. And as long as you're comfortable using the basic features of a load balancer, you still have flexibility in deployment targets. It may get implemented as ELB in Amazon. It may get implemented in F5 in your private data center. I did want to show, actually deploying these. So one of the things we're going to talk more about is policy, and policy really dictating where things get deployed and how they get configured, and separating policy and those business rules from the actual definition of the application, which is important because a lot of times it's the application teams, the solution architects that are defining the application. It's a very different team that's defining the different business rules that need to be in place. And I'll give you some examples of that in a minute. But those rules could very well be different between development and test and production. So I've got a simple example of that here, where if I were to deploy this into development, we have a public cloud policy, whereas if I went into production, we had a private cloud policy. So I'm going to actually not select either of those so I can show you the options. But what we do is the policy engine now calculates a set of deployment plans. So we look at the technical requirements as captured in the blueprint. We combine that with the business rules captured in the policy engine. We bring those two things together at deployment time to make decisions. So in this case, there's actually two options that would satisfy this requirement. I could either deploy this into AWS or I could deploy it into one of CSC's private cloud environments. But if there was further business rules in place, like if I was deploying this into development, it would just automatically deploy into AWS. And so that's really the power of the blueprints combined with the policy engine. So the next thing I did want to go into more detail with is the policy engine itself. And this is going to be a little hard to see, so I will read some of this to you. The first thing you may notice is, if you can read that far and that small, is you can model out your entire organizational structure, because the one thing that is guaranteed to be the case is you're going to have different business rules in different geographies, different business units, different application teams, and you need a system, a policy engine capable of allowing you to define and enforce those policies at all of the different levels. And then obviously most organizations are hierarchical, and so you need to be able to set policies at the root or organizational wide, and then have those trickle down and be enforced at the lower levels. And so anytime you have a situation like that, you end up with potential kind of conflicts, right? Policy conflicts. So how do you evaluate multiple policies against each other? So those are the types of things that the policy engine is able to address. And lots of different types of policies. So I mentioned some of these earlier, but some of the most common ones are things like security zone policies. So how do we ensure that workloads are being deployed into the right network segments based on the data that they're accessing or the location that they're being deployed into or the type of workload they are? From a deployment perspective, what if I wanted to say that for all sandbox environments, I always want things to be deployed into the least cost environment? So as long as all of the everything else being equal, take the list of possible deployment targets and always choose the cheapest one. And that's how we want to treat sandboxes. So being able to enforce that. Being able to limit deployments into valid networks, or being able to limit deployments around things like PCI compliance. So we talked about that. If an application deals with credit card data, we want to ensure it's being deployed into a PCI compliant data center with the right controls in place, encryption at rest, certain configurations and agents installed on the workloads. So those are the sorts of things that we can take away from the solution architects. We no longer burden them with having to consider all of these possible use cases, and we define those as policies that come in at runtime and get joined up with the blueprints to ensure we're keeping the organization safe. Being able to respond to events, being able to integrate, one of the most common ones is how do we integrate into our existing service management system? So whether we're doing some level of change management around certain activities, although the definition of what change management is and when you need to do it changes drastically in a cloud operating model. But there's still cases where you do want to be able to do it. So being able to integrate into those, being able to integrate into your operational reporting systems, IP address management, all of those are different systems that need to be thought about and integrated with anytime you're doing end-to-end application provisioning. So that's really primarily where I wanted to leave for the demo. And I'm going to turn it over here in a minute to Eric to do about 20 minutes, and we'll leave some time for questions at the end. But the main thing I wanted to leave everybody with is you can move into AWS. We're helping some of the largest organizations in the world do it as we speak right now. Just in the last couple of months, we've signed a deal with a large multinational insurance firm, helping them provision workloads and build out a hybrid model that spans both our private cloud offerings as well as AWS, moving thousands of their workloads into AWS. We just, CSC as a company is splitting in two right now. We're splitting off our US federal practice. They just got done. They have to completely move out of all of the commercial data centers that we have, since we'll be two distinct operating companies. And they moved most of their line of business applications over like a 2-month period into AWS. So this is a multi-billion-dollar government contracting company that just moved into GovCloud over a 2-month period, pretty much all of their line of business apps. So we did that for ourselves. And then we just did a multi-$100-million deal with the FAA. So if you're still thinking, you know, oh, my company's not ready for the cloud, we have too many regulatory concerns, security concerns, et cetera, I can guarantee you that all of those things can be addressed. They can all be compensated for. And you can successfully begin to use AWS and build that into your systems and your process and the types of services that you deliver to your organization. So I'll be around for questions at the end. I am happy to do that, and I'm going to hand it over to Eric right now.
All right, test. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us here today. Just a note, I know some of those things on the demo were a little bit difficult to see, a little bit, the tiny text and everything. I just want to remind everybody that we do have a booth here. It's 424, and I highly recommend you guys come out and see the demo in person, up close and live. We're going to be doing that on agility, as well as the solution that I'm going to be talking about right now, which is our on-demand workload protection solution powered by Cloud Passage. Actually, before I begin, I want to give you guys a little bit of background on myself, because I think it's important for what I'm going to be talking about today and why I firmly believe in what we've been able to accomplish over the past couple of months. So I've been at CSC for 14 years, and I started in a strike force group that did penetration testing for our customers. And over the years, I spent actually about a decade as the company's enterprise security architect working for the CISO. And that's got me many, many years of perspective that I think is very important in some of the topics that I'm going to be talking about today, as far as why CSC has decided to move to the cloud, why our customers are deciding to move to the cloud, and from a security professional's perspective, why that always worried me. And I'm typically not a Dr. No type of a security professional. I like to enable the business, not disable the business. And I think that's important, and that's important in what we've been able to do here in partnering up with Cloud Passage. So if you take a look at this slide, there are a lot of challenges that we're facing today, right? We have advanced threats. We have operational concerns that we have to deal with. We have next-gen technologies that are starting to bubble up and really take form in the enterprise. And we have, as Kyle was saying, a big push on risk and compliance, trying to make sure that what we're doing is in compliance with those regulations and even those corporate policies that we need to make sure that we're meeting. A very interesting thing that going back to my years as the enterprise security architect, and kind of that Dr. No mentality that we're constantly facing within this world from a security perception. An interesting thing here to take a look at is cost, right? Let's take a look at these individualized solutions. We have host-based intrusion prevention, we have vulnerability management, and we have technology compliance, right? So in a typical world, when we apply these to workloads or systems within our environment, you typically have to stand up 3 individualized services, and I call these kind of big box solutions, right? So not only do you have to stand up those resources and those individualized resources across your company, you also have to protect those things 24/7, 365. And what does that mean to you? Well, what it means to me is dollar signs. It's very expensive. So again, like I said, the corporation and companies that we're dealing with now, not just ourselves internally, this worries them, especially in the movement, as Kyle was talking about, to the cloud and adopting the cloud. This is usually one of the things that puts the brakes on or is a roadblock to that advancement, to that move, to that adoption to the cloud. And what usually happens in the conversation, I've had this numerous times within CSC, going back a number of years, as we started to move to the cloud, was the fact that, hey, we want to move to the cloud for these number of reasons, many of which involved cutting costs, right? Because it looks like a cheaper solution. But in a sense, when you start talking about the security that you need to protect those workloads that you're putting out into the cloud, what ends up happening is this becomes a cost security situation. And a discussion around the fact that now, as we move to the cloud, we have all these burdens of costs of security, and it doesn't become as cost effective as you once thought it was going to be. So then you start to get the perception, again, back to the security professional remarks I was making earlier, that we're the Dr. No, right? We're stopping that business enablement. We're saying, no, you can't do that. But if you want to, you can do it for this price. And it's really expensive, right? And then you take a look kind of architecturally at what today's world, or maybe just a couple years ago, world looked like. CSC definitely ran into this issue as we started to adopt the cloud. As Kyle mentioned, rightfully so, there's a lot of individualized groups within your companies. I think he was mentioning around like application developers. They see a need to move to the cloud for whatever purpose. I'm not going to get into that because I'm going to talk about security today, but they see a need to move into the cloud, and they want to adopt the cloud for a number of reasons. But what they end up doing is they go the least path of resistance. Like he said, they just swipe the credit card and they take advantage of the services. Well, the problem with that is you start to lose control, you start to lose visibility, and then you also start to lose the ability to then protect those workloads from a corporate perspective. So if you take a look at this diagram, it's very interesting. You have a whole bunch of different groups internally, whether they be production, dev test, maybe they have regulatory requirements around PCI, HIPAA. And an interesting one is you may have regional considerations. Maybe you have certain regions or business units within your company that are taking advantage of cloud and its advantages that it brings to them. And what they start doing is they take advantage of public cloud, hybrid cloud, private cloud, et cetera, and they're doing it out of compliance. They're not doing it under some big corporate umbrella. So from a corporate perspective, from my perspective in my previous role, you start to lose that visibility, you start to lose that control. And then the cloud conversation, especially around security, becomes very difficult because you now have all these workloads out there that are corporate assets that have corporate data on them that are not secure, or at least not secure in your mind from a corporate umbrella perspective, or not secure from other regulations and things like that that they may be accountable for. So the service that we announced yesterday with our partnership with CloudPassage is called On-Demand Workload Security. And this is really cool, and we're very excited about this at CSC because it's now giving us an answer for not only ourselves, but also for our customers that are moving and adopting cloud workloads, or that may have already adopted cloud workloads out there, and may resemble that graphic that I showed on the previous slide. As you can see, there's a number of features that CloudPassage Halo brings to the table, and we're really excited about these because these are typically, from a policy perspective and from a standardization perspective within CSC, these are the features that we have for our workloads, that we have for our traditional systems. So it really checks the box for us from that perspective, and it seems to be checking the box for a lot of our customers as they're very excited about this as well. What CSC brings to the table is a management capability, a monitoring capability for this solution, so that that's the value add above and beyond just CloudPassage Halo. Anybody can certainly go out and buy CloudPassage Halo. The problem is that if you buy CloudPassage Halo on its own, you're managing it yourself. And what CSC can really bring to the table is a global capability, many security professionals behind the scenes, based within our risk management centers around the world that are trained up and can provide CloudPassage in a way that's actually meaningful to you as a customer. So we have all these capabilities, consulting capabilities, the ability to create those custom rules and tool sets so that you guys can utilize CloudPassage in a more meaningful way. And it's built into agility so that when you are building out those blueprints for your workloads that you're going to be putting out into the cloud space, you can have CloudPassage along with them. So you can automatically get the benefits and features of CloudPassage ready to go, built into your blueprints. Here are some of those benefits and features. I talked about a number of the components that CloudPassage Halo brings to the table. But if you take a look at this, it really hits on a lot of the key capabilities that I was talking about. Not just those individual modules, but it also now gives you the visibility across those modules so you can make better determinations on what your systems, or I should say, how well your systems are doing out there. what's their threat profile? And you can get it almost instantaneously once these workloads are protected by Cloud Passage. Through CSC's proprietary Pulse portal, you now have that visibility to see almost immediately how they're doing. So if you deploy this within your workloads that are already out in the cloud, or if you're deploying these, if you're deploying workloads out to AWS or other public cloud providers through Agility, you immediately get to see how they're doing. And that's something that you don't necessarily get through other providers, especially if you're using those traditional big box security solutions that I was talking about earlier. You're gonna have different reporting views, you're gonna have different portals that you have to go to. Now you get it all in one, which we love from a CSC perspective, and our customers are loving for what they're using it for. So I want to go back to that slide I showed you previously with regards to cost. This is a very interesting one, not only for CSC in times of cost cutting, but our customers are looking to reduce cost. And again, the perception is as you move to the cloud, you're going to be saving costs. But with security, as I was saying earlier in that top diagram, remember, you have to have those three individual, for this particular example, and actually this is based on a customer use case. So several months ago, the customer came to us and says, hey, we're moving to Amazon, to AWS. We want these three unique capabilities. We want HIDs, we want vulnerability management, we want technology compliance. And we want it all monitored from your risk management centers. So they had a number of these requirements. And we said, okay, well, in a traditional manner, if we quote this out, it's gonna be quite expensive. And they're like, yeah, you're right, that is gonna be quite expensive because, oh, by the way, we have one more requirement. We only run these workloads 3 days a week, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And we said, wow, okay, well then it's gonna be really expensive because we're gonna have to provide you with coverage 24/7, 365. And we kind of both looked at it and we're like, this just doesn't make sense. So we had been working on the partnership with Cloud Passage and we said, hey, this actually seems like a perfect fit. So look at the bottom portion, the on-demand workload protection, the service that we're bringing to market. What this does is this takes a number of capabilities in addition to those three, and it provides it to a customer so that they can get all those checkboxes of things that they need for their requirements. So we're reducing, or we're compressing the costs across all those security solutions into one security solution. And this is consumption-based model, folks. So we then can be able to compress the costs from a horizontal perspective as well. We can then say, we're only gonna protect you for those 3 days of the week that you have a requirement for. And that's not just on licensing, that's on our security services as well. So this has been a very compelling graphic that I've been showing throughout the week and to our customers that we've been onboarding for this service. This is a game changer in my mind because it's not just the capability question, it's also, or the capability concern and the cost concern, but it's the ability to provide this in a service that's consumption-based as well. And then let's go to this graphic. So this is a follow-on to the previous one that I showed, which showed kind of a disorganized, what I would consider kind of a mess of workloads that are out there in various environments. What's nice about this is based on our service, we can now provide a customer the overarching visibility across all of their workloads, regardless of where they are, and show them that they're meeting policy, show them that they're meeting configuration compliance, show them that they have the vulnerability scores that they have set forth per their policies, show them that they have now the visibility to see all this information in a one-stop shop through our proprietary Pulse portal, which is shown down there in the middle kind of section on the left. So in summary, there's a couple key things that you guys have heard me say today and are up here. Provide full visibility across all your workloads. Remember, from a security perspective, to be able to give you that quick hit understanding of how your workloads are doing, what that threat profile is. And reduce cost and complexity. That's a big one for our customers now, is again, they're moving out to the cloud, they want to adopt the cloud for more or less cost-saving purposes, so to be able to do that in a secure manner is very compelling. And also, CSC is able to provide you with the ability to monitor and respond to these threats 24/7, 365. We have 5 regional SOCs globally that provide this service. and the capability to keep eyes on glass and make sure that your systems and the configurations and all the various requirements that you may have around security monitored and alerted on and investigated and responded to for your purposes. And last but not least, why CSC? And I just mentioned a couple of these, but there's a couple more that I want to talk about. We have thousands, I think it's over 2,100 or so, cybersecurity dedicated professionals. CSC is a large company. We have a lot of capabilities in this space, and now with this ability with on-demand workload protection powered by Cloud Passage, we really provide that overall global scale to our customers to ensure that they're properly covered, to ensure that behind the scenes we have proper and appropriate security professionals ready to provide these services to you as a customer. And here's a nice capture of those regional SOCs and the regions that they're located in. Again, providing that global scale, providing that global capability to be able to respond to threats in a meaningful and appropriate amount of time. We also have end-to-end visibility of that customer experience. And what's really cool, and I'd just like to mention here kind of a plug for our booth that I was mentioning earlier, 424. Come by and we will show you, we will demo not only agility, but we'll show you and demo this solution that we have now. We'll show you that Pulse portal. We'll show you those options and configuration capabilities within Cloud Passage itself and how CSC has already taken it upon ourselves to create specialized rules and configuration policies and all sorts of really cool things within Cloud Passage we're now bringing to the table for our customers. So definitely come by to the booth for that demo for both of those solutions. I think you're going to really enjoy that. And on the right-hand side, there's just a blown-up picture of what I was talking about with regards to the Pulse portal. Again, you have various views. You have overviews. You have executive dashboards. You can key in on certain modules that Cloud Passage provides to the table. This is all SaaS-based, okay? So there's no additional cost for any infrastructure. Time to stand up is extremely short. That's one of the feedbacks that I got when we first started looking at this within the first few months of working with Cloud Passage, is almost a surprise from our engineers as to how quickly we were able to stand this up and get it running. So as mentioned, we're at booth 424. I think it's really key that you guys come by, check out the demo. There's going to be a lot of good information that I think you can see as we run through the demo and show you with regards to these two solutions, both agility and Cloud Passage with our on-demand workload protection. One of the cool things that we've been able to do, as I briefly mentioned, is build Cloud Passage into agility. So if you have the ability to take advantage of agility and its deployment capabilities and features, we can now do that with Cloud Passage, which is very cool. So at this time, we'll open it up to any questions for both myself or Kyle.